It's not just first responders and healthcare workers that need to be concerned about bloodborne pathogens. Any employee on cleanup duty or administering first aid has the opportunity to be exposed. Bloodborne pathogens are infectious, disease-causing microorganisms in blood and bodily fluid. Workers in many occupations, including first responders, housekeeping personnel, nurses, and healthcare workers are at high risk for exposure to bloodborne pathogens. However, any person that is administering first aid has the opportunity to be exposed to bloodborne pathogens. So here we want to educate all workers on bloodborne pathogens so they can act in the safest way to minimize exposure if they have to administer first aid to a coworker while on the job. Hello, I'm Howard Walmsley, Principal and Founder of Walmsley Safety Consulting. Thank you for joining me today for another Walmsley Safety Series training topic. The three most common bloodborne pathogens are hepatitis B virus, HBV, hepatitis C virus, HCV, and human immune deficiency virus, HIV. OSHA Standard 1910-1030C1I states, each employer having an employee or employees with occupational exposure to blood or other potentially infectious materials shall establish a written exposure control plan designed to eliminate or minimize employee exposure. Your company has a written exposure control plan as part of their workplace safety and health program in the IIPP. When it comes to blood and bodily fluids, the best approach is to adopt universal precautions to infectious control. The concept of universal precautions means that you should treat all blood and certain body fluids as if they were known to be infectious with bloodborne pathogens. OSHA Standard 1910-1030D1 states, universal precautions shall be observed to prevent contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials. Under circumstances in which differentiation between bodily fluid types is difficult or impossible, all body fluids shall be considered potentially infectious materials. Bloodborne pathogens can be transmitted by ingestion, through blood, and certain bodily fluids. In the workplace, bloodborne pathogens may be transmitted from an infected person via needle sticks, human bites, cuts, abrasions, or through the mucous membranes such as the eyes and nose. Direct contact exposure. This is when infected blood or bodily fluids from another person enters another person's body directly. Example, infected blood splashes into the eyes or into an open abrasion on the skin. Indirect contact exposure. This happens when infected blood or body fluid infects another person by way of another object. Examples, a used needle pricks another person's finger, or a person who isn't wearing gloves picks up soiled gauze and has a cut on their hand, which is an entry point for infection. To prevent potential infection from bloodborne pathogens, avoid direct or indirect contact with anyone else's blood or body fluids. Always wear disposable gloves when providing first aid care. Use additional personal protective equipment or PPE like eye protection, shoe coverings, gowns, and breathing barriers when the situation calls for additional layers of protection. Dispose of sharps in designated sharps containers immediately after use. Sharps are usually used for needles, but could include contaminated glass, razors, or utility knives. If you do not have the proper disposal system for sharps, ask your supervisor or contact Walmsley Safety at questions@walmsleysafety.com. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth during or after providing first aid care. Remove disposable gloves without contacting the soiled part of the glove and dispose of them immediately in the proper container. Thoroughly wash your hands and any other areas immediately after providing care for 20 seconds. Important. All equipment, tools, PPE, working surfaces, and floors must be thoroughly cleaned and decontaminated after exposure to blood or bodily fluids. Don't skip this step. Certain bloodborne pathogens can still be infectious for days outside the body. Hepatitis B can live in dried blood for up to a week, and hepatitis C can survive for up to 4 days. OSHA Standard 1910-1030 D42 states, all equipment and environmental and working surfaces shall be cleaned and decontaminated after contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials. If you think you may have been exposed to bloodborne pathogens, wash any injuries, cuts, and exposed skin thoroughly with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Flush around the mouth and nose with water. If any blood or bodily fluids was splashed in or around the eyes, irrigate with clean water or saline for 20 minutes. Report the incident to the appropriate person within your company and record what happened by filing an incident report. Seek immediate follow-up care if necessary. Well, thank you for joining me today here for the Bloodborne Pathogens training, part of the Walmsley Safety Series. If you have questions about this training or any other safety-related questions, please ask your supervisor or contact Walmsley Safety at questions@walmsleysafety.com. Thank you again, and remember, safety is no accident.